Emily had always been a go-getter, a 30-year-old real estate agent with a knack for spotting hidden gems in the property market. When she stumbled upon the listing for a beautiful Victorian mansion at an unbelievable price, she couldn't believe her luck. The house was a sprawling structure with ornate woodwork, stained glass windows, and a history that whispered of grandeur and opulence. It was the deal of a lifetime, and Emily was eager to flip the property and make a significant profit. The mansion stood on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a dense forest that added to its mystique. The previous owner, an eccentric scientist named Dr. Hartley, had vanished without a trace years ago, leaving the property to fall into disrepair. The locals spoke of strange occurrences and eerie sounds emanating from the house, but Emily dismissed these as mere superstitions. She was determined to breathe new life into the old mansion. As she began renovations, Emily marveled at the craftsmanship of the house. The intricate carvings on the banisters, the detailed moldings, and the grand chandeliers all spoke of a bygone era of elegance. However, it wasn't long before she encountered her first obstacle. While inspecting the basement, she noticed a small, concealed door hidden behind a stack of old crates. It wasn't listed in the blueprints, and curiosity got the better of her. Emily pried open the door, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. Armed with a flashlight, she ventured down the steps, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The air grew colder and more oppressive with each step, and a musty odor filled her nostrils. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in a hidden basement, far more extensive than the one she had been working in. The walls were lined with shelves filled with jars of strange, preserved specimens. Old medical equipment, rusted and covered in cobwebs, lay scattered across the room. Emily's flashlight beam fell upon a large, blood-stained operating table in the center of the room. Her stomach churned at the sight, and she felt a chill run down her spine. This was no ordinary basement. It was a chamber of horrors. As she explored further, Emily uncovered journals and notes detailing horrific experiments conducted by Dr. Hartley. He had been obsessed with the idea of creating a new breed of human, stronger and more resilient. The notes described in gruesome detail the procedures he had performed on unwilling subjects, abducted from nearby towns. Emily's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, the reality of the situation sinking in. Dr. Hartley had been a madman, and his experiments were the stuff of nightmares. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the basement, snapping Emily out of her horrified reverie. It was a faint shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet. Her heart raced as she realized she was not alone. She turned off her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear. The sound grew louder, and she could make out the silhouette of a figure moving in the darkness. Emily's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be a squatter? Or perhaps an animal that had found its way inside? As the figure drew closer, the flashlight beam revealed a gaunt, disheveled man with wild eyes and a crazed expression. It was Dr. Hartley, very much alive and clearly unhinged. His clothes were tattered, and his hair hung in greasy strands around his face. He muttered to himself, his hands twitching with nervous energy. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she realized the danger she was in. She had to get out of there, but the narrow staircase was blocked by the deranged doctor. She scanned the room for an escape route, her eyes landing on a series of tunnels branching off from the main chamber. Without a second thought, she darted into one of the tunnels, hoping it would lead her to safety. The tunnel was narrow and claustrophobic, the walls closing in around her as she ran. Her footsteps echoed in the confined space, and she could hear Dr. Hartley's manic laughter behind her. The tunnels twisted and turned, forming a labyrinth that seemed to go on forever. Emily's lungs burned, and her legs ached, but she pushed on, driven by sheer terror. As she navigated the maze of tunnels, Emily stumbled upon more evidence of Dr. Hartley's twisted experiments. Rooms filled with cages, some containing skeletal remains, others with grotesque, half-formed creatures. The smell of decay was overwhelming, and Emily fought the urge to vomit. She had to keep moving, had to find a way out. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and determination. How had Dr. Hartley survived all these years? What had driven him to such madness? The questions swirled in her mind, but there was no time for answers. She had to focus on escaping. Finally, after what felt like hours, Emily saw a faint light at the end of one of the tunnels. Her heart leaped with hope as she sprinted towards it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She emerged into a small hidden room with a ladder leading up to a trapdoor. She climbed the ladder as quickly as her exhausted body would allow, pushing open the trapdoor and emerging into the fresh air of the forest. Emily collapsed on the ground, gulping in deep breaths of air, her body trembling with relief. She had escaped the nightmare, but the horrors she had witnessed would haunt her forever. She knew she had to expose Dr. Hartley's crimes, to bring justice to his victims. But first, she had to get far away from the mansion and its twisted secrets. As she made her way back to civilization, Emily's mind raced with plans. She would contact the authorities, provide them with the evidence she had found. Dr. Hartley would be brought to justice, and the mansion would be torn down, its dark history erased. But deep down, she knew that the scars of what she had experienced would never truly heal. The next few days were a blur of police interviews and media frenzy. The mansion was cordoned off, and a team of investigators combed through the hidden basement and tunnels, uncovering the full extent of Dr. Hartley's atrocities. The story made headlines, and Emily became a reluctant hero, praised for her bravery in uncovering the truth. But the victory was hollow. Emily couldn't shake the images of the tortured victims, the grotesque experiments, and Dr. Hartley's crazed eyes. She had nightmares every night, reliving the terror of the tunnels and the mad doctor's pursuit. She withdrew from her work, unable to focus on anything other than the horrors she had witnessed. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, Emily heard a faint tapping at her window. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She approached the window cautiously, peering out into the darkness. There was nothing there, but the tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. Emily's mind raced with fear and paranoia. Had Dr. Hartley somehow escaped? Was he coming for her? She grabbed a kitchen knife, her hands shaking, and backed away from the window. The tapping grew louder, more frantic, and Emily's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Suddenly, the window shattered, and a figure lunged at her from the darkness. Emily screamed, slashing wildly with the knife, but her attacker was relentless. She felt a sharp pain in her side as the figure overpowered her, pinning her to the ground. In the dim light, she saw the crazed eyes of Dr. Hartley staring down at her, a twisted smile on his lips. "You thought you could escape me?" he hissed, his voice filled with madness. "You thought you could expose my work and get away with it?" Emily struggled, her vision blurring as the pain in her side intensified. She felt her strength ebbing away, her body growing weak. Dr. Hartley's grip tightened, and she knew she was losing the fight. As darkness closed in around her, Emily's last thought was of the mansion, the hidden basement, and the horrors that lay within. She had uncovered the truth, but it had come at a terrible cost. The twisted legacy of Dr. Hartley would live on, and Emily's story would become just another chapter in the mansion's dark history. As Emily's consciousness faded, she felt herself being dragged across the floor. The pain in her side was excruciating, and she could feel warm blood seeping through her clothes. Dr. Hartley's manic laughter echoed in her ears as he pulled her towards the shattered window. "You'll be my greatest experiment yet," he whispered, his breath hot against her face. "A subject who's seen the truth, who understands the importance of my work. Together, we'll create something truly magnificent." Emily tried to scream, but her voice was weak, barely a whimper. She felt the cool night air on her skin as Dr. Hartley lifted her through the broken window. The world spun around her, and she slipped in and out of consciousness as he carried her to a waiting van. When Emily next opened her eyes, she found herself strapped to a cold metal table. The familiar, musty smell of the hidden basement filled her nostrils, and panic surged through her body. She tried to move, but thick leather straps held her firmly in place. Dr. Hartley loomed over her, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of madness and excitement. "Welcome home, my dear," he said, running a bony finger along her cheek. "I've been waiting for someone like you for so long, someone who appreciates the beauty of my work." Emily's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. She thought of the police, the investigators who had combed through the mansion. Surely they would realize she was missing. Surely they would come looking for her. As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Hartley chuckled. "Don't worry about your friends in law enforcement," he said, picking up a scalpel from a nearby tray. "They won't find us here. We're in a place I prepared long ago, far from prying eyes." Emily's eyes widened as she took in her surroundings. This wasn't the basement she had discovered in the mansion. It was a new lab, sterile and well-equipped, hidden away in some unknown location. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. No one knew where she was. No one was coming to save her. Dr. Hartley began to explain his plans, his voice filled with a perverse excitement. He spoke of combining human and animal DNA, of creating hybrid creatures with enhanced abilities. Emily would be his crowning achievement, a perfect blend of human intelligence and bestial strength. As he worked, cutting into her flesh with practiced precision, Emily screamed until her voice gave out. The pain was beyond anything she had ever experienced, and she prayed for the release of unconsciousness. But Dr. Hartley kept her awake, pumping her full of stimulants to ensure she felt every incision, every alteration. Days blended into weeks, and weeks into months. Emily's body changed, twisted by Dr. Hartley's experiments. Her once smooth skin was now covered in patches of coarse fur, and her bones ached from the unnatural growth of new muscle mass. She could feel her mind changing too, becoming sharper in some ways, but more feral in others. In her moments of lucidity, Emily thought of her old life, of the person she used to be. She thought of the Victorian mansion and the hidden horrors she had uncovered. How naive she had been, thinking she could expose the truth and walk away unscathed. One night, as Dr. Hartley slept in a chair beside her operating table, Emily felt something change within her. The restraints that had held her for so long suddenly felt weak, no match for her new, enhanced strength. With a surge of adrenaline, she tore free of the straps, her altered body moving with an inhuman grace. Dr. Hartley awoke with a start, his eyes widening in fear as he saw his creation looming over him. Emily's mind was a swirl of human consciousness and animal instinct, and for a moment, she hesitated. But then the memories of the pain, the torture, and the endless experiments flooded back, and she lunged at her tormentor. The struggle was brief and brutal. Emily's enhanced strength easily overpowered the frail doctor. As she stood over his broken body, panting heavily, she felt a mix of horror and satisfaction. She was free. Emily stumbled out of the hidden lab, emerging into a dense forest. She had no idea where she was or how long she'd been Dr. Hartley's prisoner. The world felt strange and unfamiliar, and she knew she could never return to her old life. She was something new now, neither fully human nor animal, a living testament to the dangers of unchecked scientific obsession. As she disappeared into the shadows of the forest, Emily carried with her the dark legacy of the Victorian mansion and its deranged owner. She had survived, but the price of her survival was the loss of her humanity. The horrors she had uncovered had become a part of her, a twisted transformation that could never be undone. In the years that followed, Stories would circulate in nearby towns of a strange, half-human creature seen in the woods. Some said it was a monster, others a ghost. But for those who knew the truth about the Victorian mansion and its hidden terrors, it was a chilling reminder that some secrets are better left buried, and that the pursuit of knowledge can lead down a path from which there is no return.